Hello friends, Wes here checking in with a new episode of the Vinyl Survivor. Thanks for sticking with me, took a little bit of a break there. Thank you to all the new subscribers, thank you for all of those who have been with me for a while now. So yeah, this is the Vinyl Survivor. This is where I talk about albums that I've bought in the past and haven't had a chance to get to. This is where I sort of go through my process of cleaning them, checking them out and seeing if there's something I want to keep or whether they're just not for me. So let's go ahead and get into this batch of records. Pretty cool stack here. Do 5 of these at a time. First thing we have here is the debut album from the Moody Blues titled Go Now. In the UK, this was titled The Magnificent Moodies, released in 1965. Released on Decca Records in the UK or London Records here in the US. And this is the US release from London Records. It was also later released in the US on Duram Records around 1970. So this is the 65 US release on London Records. And it is a very different version of the Moody Blues than most of us are used to listening to. It has a very UK early R&B rock and roll sort of vibe to it, very poppy R&B light rock sort of feel to it. It has that very 60s sort of early rock and roll UK London group sort of vibe to it, you know, sort of in the vein of the Beatles. Not saying this sounds like the Beatles, it doesn't sound like the Beatles, but it has sort of that slightly jangly light rock sort of feel to it. So this is not particularly the Moody Blues that I love. I love, you know, the later Moody Blues when they got more psychedelic, more experimental, more proggy, I guess you could say. But this was a really cool, interesting listen to hear, you know, the early form of the band and hear the sounds. This features Denny Lane on guitar and Clint Warwick, who I believe they both left before the second album, where you get Justin Hayward and John Lodge. You know, the change of the lineup signaled the change of the sound of the group, and I guess Justin Hayward definitely had a big influence on the change of the sound of the band. And so, Go Now. It's, if you're a fan of sort of 60s garage rock, light rock sort of sounds, pop rock, then this album is for you. If you're a Moody Blues fan and you just have to have everything, then this is probably for you. But don't buy this expecting that, you know, Days of Future Past sort of Moody Blues sound. It's nothing like that at all. Very different sounding. That you would be surprised that this was the same group if you didn't know. So as I said, this is the stereo issue on London Records here in the US from 1965. Yeah, I'm going to be keeping this in the collection just as a piece of history and just an interesting piece to share with other people who don't know about this period of the Moody Blues and the early sound and how they changed, and when they did change, they became much more popular. So that's an interesting piece. Okay, next thing we have to talk about is another Moody Blues album. This is the last album from what would be considered their classic period, their prog period. This is the album Seventh Sojourn, and it is their 7th album from 1972. Pretty big hits on this album. Opens with Lost in a Lost World, which is pretty well known, and then it finishes with I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band, which was a big hit for them. And this album is just excellent. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite Moody Blues albums to listen to. It just there are these, you know, sort of the things I like about the Moody Blues is just sort of questioning life and questioning humanity and questioning evil in the world. And this album sort of does that very well. You know, deals with sort of hate and race and anger and fighting and war and you know, just sort of questioning why we as humans continue to have this cycle of hate and killing and fighting and struggles, and just sort of asks those questions why. And it's a great album and a great piece of music, and I've really enjoyed digging into this one some more. One I hadn't really spent much time with in the past. But just an awesome Moody Blues album. You know, these Moody Blues albums are really easy to find. Thrift stores, dollar bins. And I highly recommend grabbing this one if you see a nice looking copy of it. Absolutely, this is an excellent album, excellent piece of music to sit down and listen to. This is the kind of thing you want to sit down and just close your eyes and really experience it from start to finish as one piece of music. And this is on their custom Threshold label, part of London Records. So that's Moody Blues, 7th Sojourn. Highly recommended, and absolutely going in the collection. Okay, moving on to something a little more modern. We have the debut EP from the band Boards of Canada, or the electronic duo Boards of Canada. This is titled Canada-Twoism from 1995. Previously extremely difficult to find. There was originally pressed 100 copies of this on vinyl. Later had another release on Scam Records, probably another small release of this. But last year they went ahead and reissued all of their albums on vinyl. And this is something I wanted to pick up. If you're not familiar with Boards of Canada, they are an extremely ambient, experimental soundscape electronic group, almost like sort of a post-apocalyptic sort of sound, and you get these weird scratchy noises and sort of strange radio transmissions that might be possibly alien or just sort of spy transmissions, and just a really cool enjoyable thing to sort of, another thing that's really good with the lights out, and just close your eyes and pretend you're in this sort of alien world that's just crazy and Mad Max sort of crazy world. So these were re-released by Warp Records last year, as I said, in 2013, even though this album's from 95. And very, very generic packaging here. These two labels are actually just stuck onto a plain white label. I don't know if that's how the originals looked on this or not. But yeah, this is a cool EP to have. As I said, their first official release, I guess you could say. And I guess at this point, there's actually a third member in the group, Chris Horn, who later left, and just the duo. So Boards of Canada-Twoism, their debut EP from 1995. This one is another one that's going to be going in the collection. Very good EP and very interesting sound work here. So if you're into this sort of electronic soundscape sort of work, check this one out. Okay, next up we have the 10th studio album from the band Flaming Lips. This is titled Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, from 2002. I guess this sort of signals sort of the start of the modern period of the Flaming Lips, where they're doing very, very fuzzy, experimental, electronic manipulations and sounds, and very sort of modern, psychedelic sort of sounds. Really cool artwork on this one, and just an excellent album throughout. This was a pretty big hit for them at the time. I didn't hear this till much later, but a cool album, and it plays well as sort of one whole piece of music. Really cool album. I know I've been saying this a lot now, but this is another one that's just great to sort of sit down and be transported to a different kind of world, and just sort of experience this as a story. And that's one thing I love about music, is I sort of experience music like a lot of people experience movies. It's sort of a one-time kind of experience, being transported to a fictionalized world, and this album definitely does that for me. Really cool. And this is a modern reissue of this, and I believe it's a 10th anniversary reissue of it. I get inner sleeve with some artwork and some lyrics. These are all on Warner Brothers Records, which is who handles the Flaming Lips stuff. Yeah, that's Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. If you're familiar with Flaming Lips, you're probably familiar with this album. If you want to check out the Flaming Lips, this is a good album to check out. Definitely recommend it, and this one's going to be staying in the collection, obviously. After I just spent a few minutes saying good things about it. Okay, and last but definitely not least, we have the debut album from Elton John from 1965 titled Empty Sky. This is the UK pressing of this album. If you're in the US, you're typically going to see it looking like this. This is released in 1975 in the US. This was the first release that this album was available as a US pressing. But this is a 69 pressing on DJM Records from the UK. Nice gatefold there. So this is very much an Elton John album from, you know, the 70s sound that you're used to. It's a little more conservative, a little more reserved, a little more singer-songwritery. But you definitely hear that Elton John sort of rock and roll sound in here. But it's a little more subdued at times, and it's really interesting to hear his debut. Excellent music. I think the most popular song on here is Skyline Pigeon. But just a great album through and through. So yeah, there's the pressing on DJM Records. Beautiful sounding pressing of this. I found this at the thrift store by my work for $2, which was just a steal to find this. Interesting thing about some of these records is you can sort of see that there's a little bit of light comes through these. They have sort of a very, you know, a Merlot sort of color, dark red wine sort of color to them, which is really cool. And yeah, it's just awesome to have a UK pressing of Elton John's first album in my collection. Just totally awesome find. So that's Elton John's Empty Sky. As I said, a good album from him, and definitely recommended. If you think you might like something that's a little more subdued, a little more singer-songwritery, a little more personal. Good album. Check it out. You know, and you're probably gonna find it like this if you're in the U.S. Same album, nothing different about it. Thanks for watching another episode of the Vinyl Survivor. If you like this video, please subscribe if you're not already. Thank you for that. Stay tuned. See you again real soon. Cheers.